VikesNow, I'm Dustin Baker. I'm here with Josh Frey. We're going to go through the Giants' triumph and the Packers on the docket. How are you this Wednesday, sir?
I'm doing good. Good after another victory Saturday, I guess. So
Mm-hmm.
nice way to get the Christmas weekend started. So it was a good one.
It was indeed. And whether I'm by myself or I'm with you on Wednesdays, it seems like we talk about the exact same type of win every week. There's always something mind-boggling about it or record-setting. And this Saturday, Christmas Eve, was no different because Mr. Greg Joseph set the Vikings record for longest field goal in team history. Before we get into that, though, let's go through some of the goofy stuff in the Giants game. What were items that you observed from these Vikings that was ho hum, could have been better, needs to get in shape before the postseason?
I mean, honestly, it was kind of just the typical stuff that we've seen pretty much this entire year. Like go up against a mobile quarterback, Daniel Jones. He kind of lit them up, especially in that second half as they were mounting their comeback. So that's definitely still a concern of mine going into the playoffs. Other than that, I think this was a pretty quality win because this Giants team they've got a decent defense. We talked about them last week, and this offense they've been pretty efficient with the ball. They haven't turned the ball over too much so far this season. Saquon Barkley is probably one of the best running backs in the entire league, so it's good to see at least for most of this game, kind of keep him a little bit quieter than usual. I know he broke off that touchdown that eventually tied the game, but
Yeah.
it evidently didn't hurt us too much. But yeah, I think this is just overall decent quality win heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, I observed a couple things. So it was probably the first time it took me 4 years to realize that Daniel Jones has staying power in the league.
Yeah.
I kind of have him pegged as Andy Dalton with the Bengals, not stylistically, but how I can consider them. Like, oh, he's a good quarterback. That's where I'm at with him. And I've known that this year he's been playing a lot better, but it's an oddity, it seems, in the modern NFL for a dude to take that long to become legitimate. And then the announcers on the Fox telecast spent oodles of time making sure we knew that this Giants team was limited on offense. They kept saying, like,
Yeah.
they got to grind it out. And they reminded me of how we used to talk about Zimmer, is like, oh, they like to play a certain style of way. They don't have the type of weapons that the Vikings do. And yeah, I think that's who they are. I think that with their upcoming drafts, they'll try to get more explosive on offense. But let me ask you this: if you size up all of the 5 teams the Vikings could possibly play, the Giants, in all likelihood, assuming the Vikings maybe lose a game to Green Bay or Chicago, the Giants are probably the most likely to come to town on January 14th, 15th, or 16th. Does it bug you at all that you have to beat the same team in the same building twice in 3 weeks?
I mean, obviously, the tape is now out,
Yeah.
I guess, for the Giants to have a game plan going into that next one, see what they can fix up. Because they were definitely that second half they brought it and they made some adjustments and they were excellent in that second half and almost cost the Vikings the game. But I do think that I think that the Vikings will be able to handle them. I think we're kind of starting to see this Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson duo. They had a spectacular game on Saturday. And if they can do that again against these Giants, I don't think that there's going to be too much of a problem. Obviously, defense hopefully gets a little bit stronger by the time the playoffs roll around. Dantzler maybe gets a little bit healthier, maybe get a Caleb Evans back in that secondary as well. So that should help shore up some more of that defensive line. James Lynch out for the rest of the regular season, but hopefully
Mm-hmm.
he'll be back for that playoff game as well. But yeah, I think honestly, bring it on. If it's these Giants, I'm all for that because there are other teams like go up against Washington. That could end up being a tough one. I know maybe Carson Wentz is playing in that game, and that doesn't scare me as much as Taylor Heineke does, just because Carson Wentz. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that if it ends up being the New York Giants, I don't feel all that. I'm not all that scared by them.
You talked about the Jefferson Hawkinson combo. I want to bring up this topic, and I'm sure we'll talk about this every Wednesday until something happens in January, February, and March. But that duo has proven via targets that they're probably the future of the receiving core for the Vikings. Or perhaps Kwesi Adofo-Mensah will spend a first or a second on wait, we don't have a second, do we?
Nope.
First or a third on a wide receiver to complement Jefferson. This is a big setup to say that Adam Thielen, unfortunately, right now is overpaid, and it will be crazy overpaid in 2023 based on the way they restructured his deal in last March or whatever it was. So I want to ask you, what can be done, if anything, with Adam Thielen in 2023, assuming he doesn't retire?
I think it's going to end up being we might end up seeing another restructure with this contract just to lower that cap hit going into 2023. But I do think that he still brings some value to the offense, especially get down in the red zone. Like he's not going to be the same guy that he was 2017, 2018, where he was racking up targets in the open field. He's still got that smooth route running ability, but he's simply not as fast as he used to be.
Yeah.
But I do think that if you get down in the red zone, he's a guy come playoff time, especially. You could probably bank on him to get a touchdown down there. So I still think that he's definitely at least wide receiver 3 quality in the NFL.
Do you foresee that restructure that you've kind of hypothesized here being another scenario of pushing money into the future, or an honest to goodness pay cut he would be asked to take?
I feel like it has to be a pay cut this time around because the numbers don't back up pushing more money into the future. Because at that point, you're looking at probably age 36, maybe even 37 for those future years. So I do think that it's going to end up being probably an honest to goodness pay cut for him.
It'll be interesting to see if he takes it because there's no law that says you got to do it. You got to be a good humanitarian for your hometown team. But yeah, it will be there's going to be a lot of talkers I don't think anybody's prepared for in January. Well, maybe we'll just wait till February if all things were going smooth. And that includes Dalvin Cook has an opt out if the team that think they could break up for $16 million. Eric Kendricks will be paid handsomely for a guy who is also slowing down a notch. So all of these, mainstays, Zimmer Vikings, are starting to hit the period of their careers where we're like, all right, what do we do with them? And that'll be a little awkward to talk about. What I want to do is talk about the Packers now. And I woke up, I think 2 mornings ago, to a text message from you that said, oh my goodness, I don't want anything to do with the Packers in round 1 of the postseason. So while we get into the week 17 matchup, I think it's quite self-evident, but let's hear it from your voice box. Why do we want to avoid Green Bay in round 1 of the postseason?
I mean, I really think that this is just a team that's catching fire at the right time. All of those that I think it was the 2017, 2016 season where they ran the table to win the division and then make the NFC Championship game. Yeah, I really don't think that anybody should want anything to do with these Packers going into the playoffs. I especially don't want them at US Bank Stadium in round 1. If you look at the offense, especially, it kind of is reminiscent of what the Vikings have been doing pretty much all year. It's just death by paper cuts for every single opponent. They're just slowly moving the ball down the field. I think over the last 3 weeks, they're second in the league in time of possession. So they've just been experts at holding onto the ball, just running the clock down. And Aaron Rodgers, if you give him the time that he's had in the pocket to throw, he's still that guy that can make a couple of these amazing MVP-like throws. So I really think that this is a team that you want to avoid at all costs. And maybe you go in there this weekend and get a win. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So let's just do that.
Yeah, it's a playoff game for them, and emphatically not a playoff game for the Vikings. Of course, Minnesota would love to have the 2 seed, which would ensure a second possible home playoff game. But the stakes are nowhere near as high for the Packers because they would face close to mathematical elimination if the the Vikings beat them. So, and I see exactly what you're saying, because even if it was the Seahawks or any Panthers, any team that would have won 5 games in a row getting into the postseason with a back-to-back MVP, you would be like, let's avoid them. But then on top of that, you have the natural rival factor. You have the notion that the Vikings have beat them twice now in US Bank Stadium in a row. And it's very rare, no matter who the Vikings or Packers are, that the Vikings can beat them 3 times in a row at home. It's just the way it goes. But I want to challenge you a little bit, because there are certain, like if you watch the Dolphins games, there are certain throws that Rodgers is bungling that is not the Rodgers of yesteryear. And I don't know if it's the thumb, because there has to be some sort of scapegoat. But there are certain moments of almost every Packers game that I've watched this year where I've turned to whoever's sitting next to me and saying, this guy ain't the same as he was. Do you think that doesn't really matter? Or do you think that it's just that you don't want to see him in round 1 of the postseason because he'll find a way not to have those confusing throws in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely not that MVP type guy anymore. Like all season, it's basically the same story. He's missing some of these throws that he used to hit all the time. Yeah, but I do think that he's definitely not that same type of guy. But he does make 1 or 2 throws every single game where you're looking back and like, how did he do that? He does it again. He does it again. And this 3-game winning streak that they're on, it's been basically that. He misses some of them, but he always hits the one that he absolutely has to hit, and he does it every single time. And Vikings playoffs, Aaron Rodgers. I think that I don't want to see it because you just know every single time he winds up to make that deep throw, it's going to be Christian Watson going off for like 50 yards for a touchdown or something. And yeah, I really just don't want anything to do with it. I don't think that he's definitely not the same player that he was in 2021, but he's scary enough that I'd rather see basically any other quarterback come playoff time.
Yeah, and there would be this element of the, let's see, 13-4 Vikings,
right?
maybe even what's our ceiling here, 14-3. It would be that element of, oh, well, of course you'd get the Packers in round one at home because that's the team that's best equipped to ruin the storybook Cinderella season that had all these close wins. All right. And the other thing that outside of Packers Vikings, I was talking with Yannick, who joined us last week, is how Rodgers' wherewithal to make those throws, even if he's having a down year or an age 39 year by his standards, is Tom Brady does the same thing every Bucs game. The whole group looks like really watered down Zimmer teams, just can't get it going on offense. Defense still looks pretty decent. And then in the fourth quarter, it's like, all right, there's 2007 Brady. We knew he'd come back. And I don't know why. I don't know what it's in. Cousins is even like that at points this year. He's gotten significantly better in the last 3 or 4 games, but during all the close wins, Vikings would be on their bullshit, especially in the third quarter. And it was like it's just a race to get to the fourth quarter because that Kirko will show up. And I don't understand why it takes the heat for some of these dudes to get going, but I think it's verifiable. All right, Packers, Vikings. I haven't polled Vikings territory and purple PTSD writers yet, but I'm going to, and I expect that to be a pretty even split. I, sir, beyond the shadow of a doubt, will be predicting the Packers to win this game because it would be very odd for the Cousins-led Vikings to win 4 straight against the Aaron Rodgers-led Vikings. Packers have everything in the world to play for. It will be somewhat cold. It's at Lambeau, and I've just been a fan for way too long to know when a loss is about to smack you in the face. Am I wrong?
I think you're dead on. I think there's a chance of snow at Lambeau this weekend. It's all just piling up and just saying Packers are going to find a way to win this game, and it might end up being ugly if we know anything about how these Vikings team loses games. So I'm with you. I think the Packers are going to pull this one off at home, and they're gonna scare us a little bit going into the wild card round now.
Yeah, I should mention that if for those like yourself who do not want to see that matchup, then all you need to have happen is the Niners win their next 2 games, because in order for the Vikings and then Packers to meet in the wild card round, that will have meant that the Niners dropped a game to the Raiders or the Cardinals, and they also need Washington to lose a game. So the Packers don't have like this pristine win and get in. They still need help from the Commanders. It just doesn't seem that daunting of an ask because the Commanders don't even know who their quarterback is. They're like, all right, well, we're going to go to Wentz now. And I don't know if that's to figure out if he got figured the shit out in the last 2 weeks and then he would be the QB1. But I don't envy a team that's trying to make quarterback decisions when they're, one or 2 wins away from the postseason. But that's the current state of the Commanders. Also on the Packers, let's see. If the Vikings are to win it, do you think, what would it be? Dalvin Cook having another humongous game like 2020? Or, I mean, it's certainly, I won't be flabbergasted if the Vikings win it. I'll just be super proud that, these guys really do know they're different. But what will be the blueprint for victory if Minnesota pulls off one of their patented 29-22 games?
I do think that it's going to end up being you got to get Dalvin Cook involved in the offense because Packers run defense has been atrocious all season long. It's been even worse than what even the 2021 Vikings were last year. Like it's been horrible. So I do think you get Dalvin Cook the ball, get him some touches early, break off a couple of those big runs that he's notorious for doing. I think the Vikings have a path to win this game, and then just you gotta throw Aaron Rodgers off his rhythm, get some pressure on him, force a turnover in that first half. It just don't let them hold on to the ball the entire game because that's how they're going to win the games if they hold on to the ball and get AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones involved in the offense. But yeah, there's definitely a path for the Vikings to win this, and I'm with you. I won't be surprised if they win. I'll be extremely proud. I just I just think that the Packers are going to find a way because it's the Green Bay Packers, it's the Minnesota Vikings, it's Lambeau Field.
Yeah, I think there's almost every scenario on the books besides one fringe one that the Week 18 game will probably mean something. So right now, I'm expecting Minnesota to lose at Green Bay and then finish up defeating the Bears at Soldier, which is also never actually the Vikings play more poorly at Soldier than they do Lambeau Field in the last 20 years. And then concluding point on Rodgers, it's probably like this league wide, but especially when he plays the Vikings, the only way that they beat him is when they're getting to him in pressure. There was a stat I remember tweeting in 2020, and I think it still holds weight. It was something like they're 0-10 when they don't sack him 4 times, and then it was the inverse. They were like 7-3 or blah 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 or something like that when they sacked him more than 4 times. That's the only way historically to for the Vikings to win is to rough him up. And so thankfully they've added this little mantra of blitzing a little bit more. It seems like it's not as much as you'd want, but I think that's the only way to get to him. Let me ask you before we get off air about Brian Asamoah. I think you've noticed, and even was called out by the Fox commentary crew, that O'Connell's putting some of these guys on a pitch count to get ready for the postseason. I think that's some of the older dudes, whether it's Hicks or Harrison Smith, because you saw Josh Patelis in there and Brian Asamoah. But A, do you enjoy the quasi pitch count? And B, is Asamoah showing you enough to potentially be an off-ball linebacker starter next year?
I do think that the pitch count for a lot of these veterans is a really good idea. You got the division clinched. You don't really need to prove anything over these past few weeks. Like if you lose, and you follow the 3 seed, yeah, it's less than ideal if you have to go to San Francisco for that divisional round game. But it's also it's not necessarily the end of the world either.
Mm-hmm.
You still got that other playoff game that you're going to play. And I do think that Brian Asamoah has the potential to be an off-ball linebacker in the future. Like at Oklahoma, he was just incredible with his ability to just run sideline to sideline all over the field. Like this dude is extremely fast, extremely athletic, and he hits hard too. Like he's not afraid of contact at all. So I think that you get him in a role where he can be primarily a run stopper. I think that's probably where he'll thrive the most. But you get him to maybe develop a little bit of his pass coverage skills, and you might have a potential star in him moving forward because he's been extremely fun to watch pretty much this entire season.
Yeah, and it's in the small sample sizes. So if he was playing 96% of snaps and then he had 1 forced fumble, I'd be like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. But he's making an impact and he's hardly playing. And I think one that even got erased was one of the Chandon Sullivan fake return touchdowns against the Colts. I think that ball was jarred loose or it was impacted by Brian Asamoah, and that won't go into his PFF grade or really any of our memory banks because it didn't count. But in theory, he should have 2 forced fumbles while playing 80 something snaps. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, it's been a ton of fun to watch.
Yeah, it is. All right. Any closing arguments?
Let's just go end the Packers season in Lambeau this week. Let's crush their dreams.
Yeah, it would be the easiest way to alleviate those 2-7 fears that you have in the wild card around the postseason. All right, sir.
That'd be the easiest path to do it.
All right, we'll be back next Wednesday and go from there. Talk about the 13-3 Vikings or the 12-4. All right, man. You take it easy.
Sounds good, my man. See you then.
Later.